Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka have entered a new political era after youth-led protest movements reshaped their governments. While the new administrations came to power with strong public support and promises of reform, they are now facing the difficult realities of governing. Economic pressures, the impact of the Iran war, and increasingly complex relations with India are making it harder to deliver on expectations. Between 2022 and 2025, all three countries experienced mass protest movements that brought down long-standing political leaders. Sri Lanka's Aragalia Struggle movement forced President 𝗞𝗲𝘆𝘄cie𝗿𝗱𝘀 from office in 2022 after a devastating economic crisis. Bangladesh's monsoon revolution in 2024 led to the removal of Prime Minister 𝗞𝗍𝘶 Hasina after years in power. Nepal followed in 2025 when the so-called Gen Z revolution toppled the government of Prime Minister K.P. Sharma Oli. Although each uprising had its own immediate trigger, they shared common causes. Economic hardship, corruption, nepotism, growing authoritarianism, and frustration with political elites fueled public anger, while social media became a powerful tool for organizing protests and spreading anti-establishment messages. The specific spark differed in each country. Sri Lanka's protests emerged from a sovereign debt crisis, hyperinflation, and severe shortages of essential goods. In Bangladesh, public anger centered on the government job quota system, favoring families of war veterans. In Nepal, widespread protests erupted after the government imposed a social media ban. Although all three countries experienced similar protest movements, voters chose different political paths afterwards. Nepal embraced dramatic political change by electing former rapper Baridhara Shah as Prime Minister in March 2025. Bangladesh instead chose a degree of political continuity by electing Tareq Rahman of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party (BNP), continuing the country's long tradition of dynastic politics. Sri Lanka took another route by electing President Anura Kumara Dissanayake, whose coalition is led by the left-wing Janata Vimukti Peramuna (JVP). Despite their different political backgrounds, each government entered office promising major reforms and a fresh start, from optimism to growing disappointment. The arrival of new governments initially created widespread optimism. Large electoral victories gave leaders strong mandates, while proposals such as Bangladesh's July National Charter generated hopes for democratic renewal. However, the early excitement has gradually faded as governments struggle to translate promises into action. Inexperience has contributed to several setbacks, raising doubts about their ability or willingness to carry out meaningful reforms. In Nepal, 2 ministers resigned within the government's first month after becoming involved in scandals despite the administration's anti-corruption platform. In Sri Lanka, frustration has grown over continued IMF-linked austerity measures, while criticism intensified over the government's handling of Cyclone Ditwa. The ruling coalition also lost support during local elections earlier in the year. Bangladesh faces a different set of concerns. Violent crime has become increasingly visible following the army's return to the barracks after the February election. At the same time, critics worry that the BNP may only implement parts of the proposed July National Charter to avoid reforms that could weaken its own political influence. Upcoming local government elections will provide the government's first significant political test. Strong election victories have not erased long-standing social and political divisions. In Nepal, divisions based on caste, religion, generation, and political ideology continue to shape society. Although the 2015 constitutions attempted to address these issues, some fear that the government's focus on younger urban voters could leave other communities feeling neglected. Sri Lanka continues to struggle with the legacy of its civil war. Although the current government has tried to move away from ethnic politics, Sinhalese Buddhist nationalism remains deeply rooted, making reconciliation with the country's Tamil, Hindu, and Muslim minorities an ongoing challenge. Bangladesh remains divided by the long-standing rivalry between the BNP and the Awami League. Attempts to establish a credible youth-led third political force failed during the election. While the Awami League's ban has temporarily reduced political confrontation, many observers believe that the party will eventually need to return to mainstream politics if Bangladesh hopes to break its historic cycle of revenge politics. The ongoing war in Iran has created additional difficulties for all three governments. Rising inflation, fuel shortages, rationing, and limited government finances have increased pressure on already fragile economies. Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka also rely heavily on remittances from workers in Gulf countries, making them especially vulnerable to instability in the region. These economic pressures have shortened the political honeymoon period that followed each country's elections. Managing relations with India has become one of the biggest foreign policy challenges facing all three governments. India remains a crucial source of humanitarian assistance, development funding, infrastructure investment, and more recently, additional energy exports to help neighboring countries cope with shortages caused by the Iran war. Yet India's dominant position in South Asia continues to generate mistrust amongst its neighbors. In Bangladesh, the BJP's victory in West Bengal could improve coordination on renewing the Ganga Water Sharing Treaty before it expires in December. At the same time, the BJP's identity-based politics and recent crackdown on undocumented immigrants have increased border tensions and risk straining relations between the two countries. In Nepal, Prime Minister Baridhara Shah's unpredictable leadership style has introduced fresh uncertainty into relations with India. His refusal to meet India's foreign secretary and renewed territorial disputes have complicated diplomatic ties. Meanwhile, the BJP's outreach to Nepal's ruling Rashtriya Swatantra Party through shared cultural initiatives may strengthen bilateral engagement but could also deepen political divisions within Nepal. The youth-led revolutions in Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka created enormous expectations for political change and democratic renewal. However, governing has proven far more difficult than mobilizing public support. Economic hardship, unresolved social divisions, governance challenges, and sensitive regional diplomacy are now testing the resilience of these new administrations. Their long-term success will depend not only on maintaining public confidence, but also on delivering meaningful reforms. Their long-term success will depend not only on maintaining public confidence, but also on delivering meaningful reforms while navigating increasingly difficult domestic and international circumstances.